Why do you think people are so outraged when you're really just like, that's how normal people talk? Um,
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that I think, there was some people that were outraged, but again, like I had like over 1,000 calls and texts and messages
yeah.
from people from all over every province in Canada, like Detroit, Florida, Massachusetts, being like, "Oh my God, you rock. Thanks for saying what everybody's thinking. We need more politicians with balls." And I'm like, "No, we need more politicians with ovaries. Thank you very much."
It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? How are you doing, Diane?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Just having a wonderful, morning. I wanted to really just thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. I was hoping also that you could introduce yourself. We all know that you're the mayor of Peterborough, but we also would love if you could tell us like your pronouns or any like relevant intersections that might be relevant to the conversation we're gonna have today.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Diane Therrien. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 36-year-old bisexual woman originally from Mississauga via Hamilton to Peterborough in 2010. Um, and yeah, and an unlikely politician, if you will, because I've landed up here. I never in a million years would have thought this when I was like a teenager, skipping school and smoking weed. And And yeah, I mean, I moved to Peterborough in 2010 to do my master's at Trent in the Canadian and Indigenous Studies program. And I fully expected to move back to Hamilton when I was done, but just fell in love with the community and the city and all the organizations. I was really involved when I was at McMaster. I was involved in the First Nations Students Association, and at Trent, the Students Association there as well. I've done a lot of union work over the years with CUPE. I was on the board of the Race Relations Committee for a couple of years. And yeah, and elected in 2014 as a councillor and then 2018 as mayor.
Okay, damn, what a resume. I didn't realize we actually had so much in common. I'm also from Mississauga.
Oh, right on.
And
Whereabouts?
I also, like the South Common Mall area.
I went to Loyola, so
Oh
I'm
my
very
goodness.
I'm
Wow.
very familiar with South Common Mall. I used to spend
So,
a lot of time there.
yeah, we probably
Yeah,
skipped a lot of school
we
and smoked
probably
a lot of
passed each
weed at
other.
we probably
Wait,
yeah,
how old are you?
I'm 34.
Okay, yeah, I'm 36, so we would have been,
So,
in the
yeah.
hood at the same time.
Oh my goodness, we probably like know some of the same people too cuz a lot of my
Probably.
friends also went to Loyola, although they would have been maybe a bit younger than you. Anyways, as much as it would be fun to reminisce, maybe we could do
Yeah,
that in person sometime.
absolutely.
Um, yeah. So last night it was your last city council meeting as mayor.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Okay, and
will there be
the
cursing?
cursing is
Yes.
beginning too.
If we're
So
allowed
you
to
can
curse.
curse. You are
Okay.
allowed to curse on Twitch. We have a content warning that is like, hey, this is
I did
for a
see
mature
that. Yeah.
audience as well. So, however, I probably for will have to bleep it out later,
Okay. I
on the
will I
for the
will refrain.
for the YouTube algorithm. But do your best. You can as long as I don't have to bleep out like half of the sentences. That
No,
would probably
I
be
will
better.
be on my best behavior. Yeah.
All right, all right. So, I guess like what was the vibe like? It was your last meeting.
Yeah, I mean it was great. We're still unfortunately doing fortunately or unfortunately doing virtual meetings. So there was, I think, four other counselors that came in person. So it was nice to see some folks, in the flesh, rather than
Okay.
just like the bobbing heads on screens. Um, but yeah, it was, it was done by like 7:30, so it was relatively painless, which was good.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, sometimes those meetings can go until 11 midnight, 1 in the morning. So I was kind of glad that that didn't happen because then I had an 8:30 meeting this morning. I try normally to keep my Tuesday mornings pretty open in case the council meeting runs super late. But yeah, no, it was good. It was, it was kind of bittersweet, but also sort of celebratory. Councillor Capo was there in person too, and we were kind of reminiscing. And she had a, at the end, before we closed off the meeting, I, thanked staff for the work that they've done over the years and support, especially through the clerk's office, who do all the sort of behind the scenes, making the meetings run smoothly. That was a big transition when COVID hit to move everything online. Hard enough for a millennial, and then most of our counselors are a bit older than millennials. And
Right.
yeah, so IT and all that just have been so helpful and patient. And yeah, no, so it was good. It was nice to see, Councillor Baldwin was there, and Councillor Wright, and Councillor Vasiliadis, Councillor Capo, and I. So we, had a good little chat and took some pictures, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah. It's like the end of an era, really.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think I mean, I still have, like, technically still, I mean, the election's not for another month. And then the term is like legally under the Municipal Act, the term doesn't end and the new council starts on November 15th. So I'm
Right,
still
right.
here for like another 6 weeks. So it hasn't really sunk in. And I still have like police board meetings and conservation authority meetings, and, and then just like the normal mayoring stuff, going to events, responding to emails, constituent stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it hasn't really like sunk in yet, but it will in October.
Okay, yeah, for sure. But it does feel like the one of the milestones towards you wrapping up your time as mayor. So, um I guess, a lot of people, including myself and the more progressive folks in Peterborough, we were of course hoping that you would throw your name back in the ring at the last minute
Yeah.
and run again. So I guess we're all just kind of curious, and maybe some of us know the answer, but I guess why did you choose to not seek re-election as the mayor of Peterborough?
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks volumes about the culture at City Hall and City Council that myself, Councillor Capo, and Councillor Zippel, the three progressive women on council, all decided not to seek re-election.
Yeah.
I will say that, this term has been particularly challenging for anybody in elected office with the pandemic, which again, when I campaigned in 2018, did not foresee, a global pandemic throwing off the whole term. Um, I mean, on top of that, I've spent 8 years in elected office now. Again, not something I ever thought I would do. I always said, I'm a strong believer in term limits, and I had always said if I run for mayor, I'll do one term, maybe two, but that would be it. And so yeah, there's a lot of I got to be diplomatic in how I word this, so I'm not, I don't get in trouble. But there's been a lot of challenges for me with certain members of staff and council
Okay.
who um, uh who don't want who don't want the boat rocked, sort of thing. And I mean, we can talk about the sort of old boys club and the old guard in this town, and
Yeah.
our local print media is a huge part of that. And when I first got elected in 2014, and that was the same year that Mary Monsef ran for mayor and almost won. um
Right.
and people kind of, I think, not the community, but like some of the old boys around the table and at City Hall, and they're not all boys, so I just use that because women can be part of the old boys club. The
Okay.
Because I don't want to say old people's club, the old guard. We'll say the old guard.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
a lot of whom have been, working at the city since, before we were born. And a lot of the counselors around the table. It's also worth noting that Kim, Kemi, and I are all not originally from Peterborough. And so the old guard sort of sees us and has sort of treated us like always like outsiders. Like when I first ran, people were like, nobody knows who you are. You're never going to win. Why are you even running? Don't you know this incumbent is so well known and they've been here forever? And I'm like, well, I moved here to do my master's. Like I didn't know anybody. I had no family. I had no friends in Peterborough.
Yeah.
But I'm used to hustling. Like I've had to hustle my whole life for what I have. And that's, I think, one of the big differences. And that's one of the things that some folks don't necessarily like, is that they sort of take for granted that they're able to say, oh, don't you know my father-in-law or my husband or whoever, my last name is this. Like people in this town still can't pronounce my last name. And And so part of the reason I'm, not running again is that, I mean, there's a lot. I could spend the whole hour talking about that. Um, but there is a culture at City Hall that is still, very much rooted in a really old style of politics and a really old style of governing and doing business, and that's not how I roll, obviously. And so that was a challenge, on top of the sort of the fact that I was not from here and sort of seen as an outsider. There was, the misogyny. There's also a lot of ageism, because again, I was
Okay.
32 when I was elected mayor, and some people just didn't, really take me seriously in that way. Um, Anyways, and then it's been a challenge with this council was elected in 2018, one of the most diverse councils in Ontario. We had 4 women, 2 people of color, 2 people that weren't born in Canada, a bunch of us, the three women and Councillor Wright, like all from not from Peterborough, which has made it a really interesting dynamic because you have these different perspectives and voices around the table, which is what we need. But it
Yeah.
also becomes a challenge because we're also the ones that get hammered the hardest um, by the local media, by trolls on social media, um, all of that kind of thing. And one of the other things that I want to kind of talk about, which I'm sure we'll get to, and just cut me off anytime because I can rant about this for like a long time.
Okay, sure.
um,
I guess I am just curious, like, how much time do you have? Are we gonna cut it at noon? Can we go past?
we can go a bit
Or
past noon. Yeah, yeah,
okay, yeah, sure. All right.
yeah.
So let's do it. We can ramble a bit then.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I forget where I was going, so just maybe ask the next question. I'll get back on track.
Okay, sure. I mean, one of my questions is just like what, when we talk about an old guard, it evokes an image in my mind like an old white balding, or if not already bald man. And really, like, everyone, a majority of the people that I know here in Peterborough are like us. Like, they came from Trent University. They're younger. They're woke or whatever. They're just like people of color, or and it's like, so what can we do, even if the mayor of our city is kind of unable to wield any significant power against this old guard? Then, like, how do we fight them? How do we make the
Yeah,
transition and make Peterborough the place that it is,
I think I think the biggest thing, and I've had conversations about this with Kim and Kemi, is that because progressives like actually hold themselves to standards, whereas like right-wing people don't necessarily hold themselves to the same standards. Um,
Yeah.
we're also really hard on each other. And so, some of there's some people that I, expected to sort of help support me that were kind of the most critical and the most harsh. And again, not saying that I did everything perfectly, but the thing with progressives too is like I had people coming up to me saying like, I'm really sad you're not running again. It's really sad you're not running again. I've always supported you. It's like, but we didn't get any of that public support aside from a few people on Twitter, that would kind of go to bat for us. I remember trying to get some friends to write a letter to the editor, in response to one of former Mayor Sutherland's like numerous attack columns on me. Worth noting that she's BFFs with Henry Clark and his wife, and she's been campaigning for him openly for years. Um,
I see. Okay.
and and I asked a few people, and these are people that have like they were like tenured professors at Trent. So super privileged, job security, whatever. And they were all unwilling to like sign their name to a letter to the editor, because they didn't want to like be seen as political, which is the whole point of tenure. And so, and I
Right.
had other people say like, "Oh, I wanted to write a letter. I wanted to write a letter." It's like, okay, but you didn't. So, and again, that's fine. But when people I had a counselor as well a couple years ago say, "Oh, I saw what some people said to you on Twitter, and I was really going to respond, and I just wanted you to know that." And I'm like, "Okay, but you didn't. So you telling me this is just making yourself feel better. You're not actually helping me. And you were also elected to be a leader in the community, so take a stand and support me in that way." You know, not obviously that doesn't mean like you always have to vote the way I vote or whatever, but if you feel like I'm, being unfairly targeted or whatever, and this is true for anybody in elected office, um, speak up for them. So like, I know that there was just, there was a feeling that, there was so much excitement around the campaign back in 2018, and, Kim and Kemi and I all got like elected with tons of votes, and then some of those people that were our biggest supporters seemed to turn into our biggest critics. And it wasn't out of malice or out of, you know, but people also expected us to be able to make change like this
Yeah.
without the understanding of how the bureaucracy is at City Hall and how slow government works. And that's something that too was super frustrating for me, to try to deal with. So
Right.
that's a long-winded way of saying, like, I think that's one of the things that people, if you're wondering what it is you can do, help us take on the trolls on social media, because the men on council aren't doing it. The men
Yeah.
on council didn't ever come to my aid or whatever. And there have been some champions in the community and, Twitter angels, um, who help do that. But,
Okay.
um, and that's like a kind of a simple thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, Other than that, we're going into, an election now. There's some really great progressive people running throughout the city. If you're able to help them knock on doors or make phone calls or whatever it is, that's really helpful. And then again, if they get elected, even sending an email once a month, just say like, you're doing great, because we get so much hate, right? We get so much hate. People don't generally tell you when they're happy or when they're
Yeah.
just kind of like, meh, whatever. You just get a lot of the negativity. And so when I get emails from people being like, over the years, being like, thank you so much for this, you're doing great or whatever, it goes a long way in keeping morale going. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I totally. And we did talk to Counselor Kemi, and we heard a similar thing. Like you're probably getting like 10 hate emails for every pat on the back, or maybe even worse than that, right? Because
yeah,
yeah, as you say, um, you know, if we're kind of like infamous for this being on the left or being progressives, is that we hold each other to such a high standard.
totally,
Um,
absolutely. And that, that is a good thing, but when,
yeah,
but there has to be a balance or like an understanding that we're not, we're also just humans. We have feelings and emotions, and we get upset about, people, that,
of course.
and again, it's like if yeah, anyway, so
Yeah.
absolutely. I
I
think that
mean,
yeah,
even as like a normal person, you sometimes are like you talk your shit on Twitter, and you're like, "Hey, why am I dedicating so much of my mental space today to like something that like someone I don't even know said to me on Twitter, and that was mean." Like
yeah.
even as
Oh,
a
I just
a
blocked them.
normal
Yeah.
person. So, it's like I can only imagine how that does like affect your mental
Oh
health
yeah,
over
mental
time.
health and
So,
well-being,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's it's been a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is that the demands of the job are so much, and especially like, so I'm full-time, counselors are like ostensibly part-time, even though like the amount of work that counselor Zippel puts in, honestly, like she does more work than most of those counselors combined. She's our Leslie Nope. She's our local Leslie Nope, and
Okay.
she's going to be if you haven't watched Parks and Recreation, people, you have to. It's
Yeah.
I watch it and then I had to stop because it was like too triggering sometimes. But do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen it?
Sorry, talking about what? Parks and
Parks and
Recreation?
Recreation. Have you
Yeah, yeah,
watched it?
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, I Leslie Nope. Yeah, we I think most people know that reference. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Um just like, die hard civil servant, heart is in the right place.
Thoroughly
Um
researches everything, puts in, doesn't sleep because she's putting her notes together and all of that
yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I forget
And
what
I
the
mean, when we talked to Counselor Kemi, right? We know that like it's a part-time job. Some counselors, if they're not in the financial position to be able to accept that as their sole income, they have to work another job. And
Yep.
it's really something that's designed for people who are already in power and privilege. and are retired, or like
Yeah, well, I
it's
mean,
basically catered towards old men is what I'm
well,
trying to
and when
say.
councils, when
Um,
councils were started, aldermen back in the day, like it was a volunteer position. It was a volunteer position. And
okay.
so it was the businessmen and the people that were able to maybe get a union leave that, were able to do it. Working people couldn't do it, poor people couldn't do it. And so there's still a holdover from that. And we have this conversation each term of council. There's a discussion about like council compensation, and
Okay.
there's some members who say, well, it's public service and you should just do it for free. And it's like, well, that's nice for you because you're retired and you have a full pension and benefits. I don't
Yeah.
have a pension. I don't have benefit. I'm the only full-time employee at the city that doesn't have benefits. um and
You don't have benefits as the mayor.
No, because again, when you had the former mayor who was like a millionaire and the other mayors
Yeah.
who, again, had pensions and were way further on in their careers, they didn't want to implement that because they didn't need them, or they didn't want to be seen as sort of bumping up their own kind of salary.
Right.
And But again, the thing is that counselors make around $30,000 a year, which is still a lot of money for a lot of people. I get that. But for the amount of work that's expected to be put in, and then on top of that, if you are a single parent and you have to come to council meetings or whatever committee and board meetings and pay for childcare, all your money is going to be going to that. And so I've had people say, well, I want to do it, but like, it's not worth my time when you do the cost benefit analysis. And even running a campaign costs money. I mean, you fundraise and all of
Right.
that kind of stuff, but again, they changed the regulations so you can't get money from corporations or unions. Fine, but rich people are able to fundraise very easily. Low income people, it's a lot harder, right? You don't have a
Yeah.
network of friends that can write you a check for $500, you know?
Right.
And so it's just, there's still that gatekeeping around, well, we don't want to pay more. But then it restricts who is able to run or who is willing to take it on, knowing that, you're going to be,
Yeah.
putting in
Is there
way more time than you get paid for.
Of course. Yeah, it's almost like being a live streamer. Wink, wink. I chat. But is there anything being done about it? Like, can anything be done, or are those gatekeepers still gatekeeping? And when the
Well,
progressive counselors try to make it better, it's just not happening. Or
they will. So when the new council comes in, again, this issue of compensation will come up because it's in the bylaws that there's a discussion around it each
okay,
term. And again, it wouldn't be for that council, it would be implemented the following council. So
I
it's not
see.
like council comes in and gives itself a raise. Council comes in and decides whether in 4 years the position will pay more or have benefits or whatever it is. I mean, I personally think, I mean, most councils in Ontario counselors are part-time. I think that rather than having two part-time counselors per ward, we should have one full-time counselor per ward that
Right.
makes a good salary. Because that's the thing too, is that we were elected, you get elected on, you campaign and you talk about what you want to see. And then you get in, and like I have one administrative staff person, that's it. Counselors don't have any administrative staff support. And then because a lot of them are working other jobs and then trying to do, it pays for what is supposed to be like 20 hours of work a week. If you take out like 15 of those are meetings, another 5 of those is prepping for those meetings. That doesn't give us any time to actually work on policy development, research, those kinds of things. Where if it was full time, you'd be able to go into the office, you'd be able to really be like, okay, I campaigned on wanting to get this done, and I actually
Yeah.
have the time and the resources to do research about what other communities have done on this. How can we bring this sort of thing forward? Um, because we can ask staff to do that for us, but staff are also, have their whole workload on the
Right.
go. So, that's something that when you have big cities like Toronto or Ottawa, their counselors have, 3 or 4 or 5 people in the office. One's doing comms, one's doing constituent stuff, and then a couple others are just doing research and policy for how they can bring their counselors' motions forward and the evidence that they need to push them forward. And
Okay.
because
Yeah.
smaller communities don't have that, it makes it difficult. But Peterborough's a growing mid-sized city, so we need to start talking about how to adapt our council to reflect that.
Right. Yeah. That sounds like a huge issue. Really. It's like it's one of those issues that is like the key to all the other issues.
Yeah.
That it's like if we could get more people in the right places, then we would, when everyone raises their concerns, they might actually get addressed, right? But it's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I mean, that's the
yeah.
thing, counselors are, working like a lot of them 9 to 5 jobs, and then they go, and then people will be like, I emailed you 2 days ago and I haven't heard. Like, that's actually pretty good because they don't have anybody answering their emails for them. They have to find the time to do it and also to take care of themselves,
Yeah.
Like, we've all
Right.
gone through periods where it's like, I know Kemi and I text about this. I'm like, did you eat today? She's like, oh, no. Did you? I'm like, no, like, we better fucking eat something, because you get so
Yeah.
wrapped up in all the work and the demands that you don't take care of yourself. And if you're not taking care of yourself, how are you going to take care of the community?
Of course. Of course. Right. It's like being on the airplane, putting your own mask on first.
Yeah,
That whole
exactly.
analogy, right? Like, yeah. Yeah. So,
And
okay, for
that's something that
sure.
I've been learning. Like, I've finally learned it in like the last year. It took me 3 years
Yeah.
of marrying to be like, okay, girl, you got to like learn to say no to stuff and delegate.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah. Um just moving on. I mean, there's so much we can really talk about. But I wanted to just talk about like a bit about your legacy as a mayor and as a counselor, as a politician so far. My mom really likes to do this thing where she goes through like your rose and your bud. Have you ever heard of this like exercise?
no, say that again. You kind of cut out there. Your rose.
Oh, so yeah, sorry, your rose
Oh, your
and your
rose
bud.
thorn and your bud.
Yeah. So maybe like reflecting on your time as mayor or as a counselor, like your rose is like the thing that is maybe your greatest achievement or biggest victory. Your thorn is being like the worst thing that happened to you, and your bud is like what you're looking forward to in the future. So could we play
Yeah.
that game real quick?
Yeah, totally. I haven't done that before, but that's awesome. Your mom sounds cool.
Yeah. Her name is
Yeah,
also Diane, just for the just so you know. It's like
two N's or
so
one.
one N. Yeah,
There
so
you go.
same as you. She's probably watching right now. So shout out.
Awesome.
Shout
Hi,
out to
Diane.
Diane.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say the rose. I mean, this is going to sound kind of cheesy. Like, there's a lot of things like, adopting the new official plan, which is really progressive. A lot of the local developers were really against it. The former mayor was lobbying us to not pass it. Um,
Nice.
and we did. So that's good. Like, that's one of those things that isn't that sexy, but it like sets up the city for long-term success. It's really progressive, talks about the need for increased density, working towards climate change targets, working towards equitability in housing and those things. So that's really, that's a really important thing. I think, the other thing that I like to think is, wait, is this where I talk about like the legacy stuff or is that the bud?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I The rose is like the good stuff,
The rose is the
Like
good stuff.
you
So
could
I
you could
would,
say more than one thing for each if you want
okay.
as well.
Yeah.
Since, it's been a
I
long
would
time.
say like, so this is probably a rose and a bud because it's like one of these things that I'm proud of, but it's going to continue.
Okay.
So one of them is before I was elected, the city had never done anything around like National Indigenous Peoples Day, didn't have a relationship with Curve Lake, Hiawatha, or Nogojiwanong, like urban Indigenous folks. I struck this Indigenous engagement consultation committee and have worked extensively with Chief Carr and former Chief Weetung and now Chief Knott, who was just elected out in Curve Lake. And so just last night at council, we brought a motion to work towards signing on this thing called a friendship accord, which is the county of Peterborough is part of it, Hiawatha, Curve Lake, Otonabee, South Monaghan, Selwyn, and Peterborough and the Kawarthas economic development. And that process started before I was mayor, and the former mayor at the time, I think, just didn't have was just like nope. And so we passed a motion last night that the city and the next council is going to continue the conversations with that group about how to get the city signed on to that friendship accord. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important and related to that in terms of trying to build relationships not just with First Nations but marginalized communities and communities that previous councils didn't really pay much attention to or have time for. Um, is really important. So like Pride this weekend, I saw you there at the protests
Right.
on Saturday. I think it's really important to use your power for for good, not evil. But again, to speak up for folks when they're needed, and stand up to people that are trying to cause harm in the community. So related to that is when I'm at those kinds of things, and somebody will come up to me and say, "Oh, my daughter saw you. My daughter's 10 years old, and she saw you in the parade, and she thinks it's so cool, and she wants to be mayor one day." And I'm like, "Awesome! She can run for council when she turns 18." So again, changing that idea of what a mayor or an elected official is supposed to look like. You don't have to be a 60-year-old dude. Kemi had a similar thing as a young Black woman. That's so inspiring to see. It's like, yeah, you can do this, and it's not easy. But I'm just waiting for, like, I just want Gen Z to come in and take over. I just want all the like openly queer, non-binary kids to be around the council table and just shake things up.
Yeah.
So 2026 people, because it's too late to run for this municipal election, but 4 years from now,
All right. Yeah.
because we need
2026.
that.
Let's go.
We need
Let's
that.
go. Let's get
And then,
ready.
yeah. And so that's kind of the bud and the rose. And then the thorn, I think, I mean, there's a few. I think that, a lot of it would be the resistance I had from specific members of staff and council towards anything I wanted to do just because they didn't want me to succeed. We talk about this a lot when we talk about, like, hiring diversity, equity, inclusion officers, or setting up these kinds of things where a lot of people are set up, they're not set up for success, you know.
Yeah.
And so, I've had some staff members who have been extremely supportive and have helped me get through. But some of the more old guard ones have been, very, like, have stonewalled things, kind of at every turn, and just not, done the job that they're supposed to do in terms of helping a mayor and council achieve their objectives.
Hmm. Okay. Again, I notice again being quite diplomatic. No, no, not naming any
No
names,
naming
but
names. I don't
I
want to
guess
get
for
a slander, lawsuit.
okay. Right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that
it's not
would
slander
that
if
would
it's
suck.
true, but
But yeah, it's not always that easy, right? It can
yeah,
still get tied up in court and cost you a whole bunch of money.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's great. It's nice to hear like a quick reflection of your time as mayor. Can we go through some specific questions? Maybe just like
Yeah,
rapid fire as quick as we can. There's like so
sure.
much I'm sure that people want to ask you because you're like kind of like this wealth of knowledge now, especially being on the inside of all of this stuff. Um so I guess one big thing that is on everyone's mind as of lately is the Peterborough Transit.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of people say that it's broken and it needs to be fixed. And if you're on Twitter and following the transit account, you get the notifications that several bus routes are being canceled today. And um, I guess in
Yeah.
your eyes, like what needs to happen in order to fix it, and I guess and why did it become this
Y-
way?
Yeah, I mean, so we made major changes to transit when COVID hit. Part of that was to not have everybody have to congregate at the downtown terminal, at the height of the pandemic.
Okay.
I when I moved here, I only took the bus. I didn't have a car. But I was a Trent student and I was able to take the Trent Express, which is like the best bus route in the city.
It's like
Um,
the only good one that
it's
runs
like the
every
only
like
the
10
Fleming
minutes,
Express is
right?
pretty good too. But
Okay,
I
okay.
mean, the thing is, we're on this hub and spoke system, or we were, right, where all the buses come downtown and they all fan out, and
All
we
right,
really
yeah.
need to figure out a way to move to more of a grid system. Now, Peterborough isn't really a grid city. Like, we kind of we're not so straightforward as some cities where you could just have the major
Yeah,
thoroughfares. But I mean, in my view, I don't understand why there's not one bus that just goes up and down Lansdowne all the way up back and forth on Lansdowne, and then you have one that goes up and down, George and Water, so that if you're up in the north end, you just go down and then you go over,
right.
and
You
so
just switch and it runs so frequently that you're not waiting 40 minutes or whatever.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
that would be nice.
That would be nice. And so we spend all this money on, transit studies and route reviews and all this kind of stuff. But um, again, the problem, and we talked about this at council last night and passed this motion to have this transit user liaison group. Because part of the problem too is when you have these studies being done, it's like we don't need to bring in a consultant from Toronto who's never taken the bus in Peterborough, is never going to take the bus in Peterborough. How are they going to tell us what the users need? No, you need to talk to the people that actually use transit. Um, I mean, we do have some of the issues with regards to like buses not coming, relate to, a driver shortage that we're dealing with, people that are off sick, and especially with COVID, and there's been this wave going around. I know like
Right.
17 people with COVID right now.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. If they can't get backup drivers to take on that route, they have no choice but to shut it down. We don't have the same kind of staffing complement that bigger cities do. Um,
Right.
I mean, we have this debate, and I'm sure you talked about this with Kemi, um, every year at budget, and then it comes up throughout the year around funding for transit. I know this is supposed to be a quick rapid fire, but and again, that's the problem, is that you have councillors making decisions about transit, none of whom use transit. Kemi and I are, and a couple others use it occasionally,
Yeah.
but most of them that are the most vehemently opposed to funding transit, it's like, yeah, that's because you have a personal vehicle and you don't have to use it. Um,
Right.
and again, transit doesn't make money. It only makes money in like two cities of the world, in like Japan, I think, where everybody uses transit. North
Yeah.
America, it's not going to make money. It's not supposed to. It's an essential service
Right.
that we have to provide.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
that's
hard for,
my
I guess it's hard for some people on council to realize that, hey, you might actually have to lose money
yeah.
and not run it like a business in order
Yeah, but
for
I mean, we spend tens of $1 millions on roads,
yeah.
roads, roads for cars, and then they'll get
Right.
all upset about a couple cycling lanes. And again, Kemi and I
Yeah.
are really the only ones that bike around that table. And so when people are like, we don't need bike lanes there, and I'm like, yeah, that's because you just want to drive down there in your SUV. Those of us that bike know that yes, yes, they're on Charlotte Street finally. They should have been on Charlotte Street years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And still, I mean, there's like, I think a huge demand still for bike lanes.
Oh yeah.
Um I'm
And there's more
always
planned, like in the
yeah.
cycling master plan, and actually the new transportation demand planner who's coming in, Lindsay Stroud, who you might know, used to work for Green Up. She's a friend of
Okay.
mine. She's brilliant. She's a cyclist, and she's gonna be such a great addition to the city, and she's gonna hopefully get, not to put too much expectations on her, as progressives, this is what we do. But yeah, keep building bike lanes. Again, they're cheaper than roads. They help with
Yeah.
congestion. They're better for business. They help towards climate change. Biking is way more fun than driving anyway. But
Yeah.
again, we also need to make sure that transit is accessible. Not everybody can ride a bike, right? Like people with mobility issues or whatever.
Right. Of
So,
course.
but we need to not
Yeah.
just be investing in roads and cars and parking lots.
Okay. Awesome. Agree. And okay, moving on, since this is the rapid fire.
Mhm.
Climate change. Of course we all had our kind of climate change moment here with the derecho. It seems like there's like a hurricane or a typhoon like every other day on the news. So I mean, like, what are we as a community doing to? I don't think there's anything we could do to maybe avoid these things, but like, how are we maybe getting prepared
Yeah.
for, let's say, another derecho or severe weather events?
Well, and that's funny because on last Friday, Peterborough had its first environmental and climate change expo over at Ecology Park, and Kim, that was Kim Zippel's brainchild, and she put hundreds of hours of work into that. Her and Councillor Capo, again, the women that are leaving council, doing the most work. And it talked about all the things that the city's doing, because there's a lot of things happening that people don't know about, whether it's, and they seem small, but they do add up, whether it's like the low flow toilet rebate, we have this new rebate to help people transition from natural gas to more sustainable forms of heating your house. Getting people out of their cars onto transit, onto bikes, if we can make cycling lanes, safe and accessible for people. There is a
Yeah.
lot being done, and it'll be easier. Like our one of our staff members read like a 5-minute thing about all the things that the city's doing with regards to that. We're
Okay.
doing a lot of work on
Awesome.
our urban tree canopy. We lost a lot of it in the Dara show. Um, but I think it's also important to know that like municipalities are the ones that are dealing most closely with climate effects. We see this out in Porto Basque and what hit out east the other day. Um, you know,
Right.
But we don't have the funding to help deal with it. And so this is where the province and the feds need to freaking tax the rich and redistribute it to the municipalities. They're expecting us to have these climate change plans and implement these things, but we don't have the funding to do it. Meanwhile, they want to give tax breaks to the people that are making tens of millions of dollars a year. So I've always been an
Yeah.
advocate for tax reform. That's not something that the municipality has the authority to do, but it's something that we need the federal and provincial governments to do. Um,
Okay.
but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I love that answer. What should we do about climate change? Tax the rich.
tax
That's
the rich.
that's.
That's what we should
I
do
think
about
that's
pretty
a
much
good answer.
everything, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, most of these
So move.
issues that we're most of these issues
Yeah.
that we're seeing, housing issues, unaffordability, like all that started back in the 80s in Reagan, Mulroney, Thatcher when they decided to cut taxes to the rich and then also cut social service programming because they weren't getting the money in. So they've been, eroding our social safety nets. We see this happening in our public health
Right.
system, our public education system currently. I'm not going to go on a
Yeah.
rant
Okay.
about
That
that,
does
but I could.
that does segue into my next question is about healthcare. Peterborough, as you say, like it's a growing medium-sized city, and a lot of people I know, and they say like thousands, if not 10,000 more or more people don't have access to a primary care physician. Um, so I am wondering, like what if anything is being done besides that? It frustrates me every time when I hear that, oh, they're building a new hockey or sports arena. Like, but could they build a facility that could have more family doctors potentially, instead of just allocating resources to, again, not to everyone, but to a select group of people?
Yeah. I mean, so the thing to remember here is that under the legislation in this province, healthcare is a provincial responsibility. It's
Right.
not a municipal responsibility. So
True.
we do have a program to try to recruit family doctors here that we pay for, that I would argue we shouldn't have to pay for, but we do because it's important. But when we talk about like a lack of um, clinics, hospital space, healthcare is provincial. And so we need them to step up and help us with that. And so far, they haven't been coming to the plate the way that they should.
Right.
There's a lot of, there needs to be incentives for people to want to get into family medicine and get into general care practicing. Now that again needs to come from the province because they need to be offered, good wages and because we also have this host of elderly doctors that are going to be retiring soon, and so those people are left without a doctor. That's going to compound the problem.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the city does what it can. We've written letters of support for the community health clinic that they're planning, supporting different initiatives that more grassroots people are taking on because the province has been has been freaking AWOL in actually dealing with that. But you need to write the Minister of Health and the MPP and the
Okay.
Premier to advocate for more funding for family doctors and more facilities for them to work out of.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, luckily, we are getting some funding from our provincial government. Recently, it was announced that $185,000 is going to be invested into increasing CCTV surveillance downtown. So, I guess, do you have an opinion about this? Like, do you think it's something that's going to make our city safer, or do you think maybe that money could be better spent?
Well, so I believe, and I sit on the police board, right, which is also like a weird thing for me. I believe that was a grant that the police board applied for. I might be
Okay.
wrong. I'll have to check.
Okay.
I mean, CCTV, like we know, in Britain, it's like ubiquitous everywhere. We know it doesn't necessarily help to deter crime. It does help solve like with the clearance rates and it help with solving that. Of course, like everything does, unfortunately, comes down to money, right? So sure, it'd be great to spend the money on other things. If we were actually funding healthcare and mental health and addictions resources, then a lot of these folks wouldn't need to commit, petty theft or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, and I think too, the interesting thing as somebody who's lived in Toronto and Hamilton, and is sort of used to visible poverty, I think a lot of people from Peterborough who say like, I'm scared to go downtown. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, there's like maybe three people that panhandle aggressively, and we all know who they are. The
Yeah.
vast majority of people are just living their lives, and they're not maybe fortunate enough to have a house to do that in. Um,
Yeah.
and so again, but visible poverty should make us uncomfortable because it's a reminder that in a country as wealthy as we are, we still have people that are left behind. And that's
Right.
something that, again, needs to be addressed by taxing the rich and properly investing in mental health addiction supports. We know the vast majority of people that are unhoused or that are, living outdoors have had some kind of traumatic childhood experience, abuse, whatever. That then people turn to substances to help cope with the trauma that they've dealt with because they can't access proper um, uh, you know trauma counseling or rehabilitation in that way.
Right.
So you know this is supposed to go back to the CCTV things. I mean, we don't want to further criminalize poverty. So again, we're just going to kind of see how it is. I know a lot of businesses are wanting it. So if that gives them some peace of mind, sure. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess as you say, the money is already, it sounds like it's gonna happen. Uh,
Yeah.
so, and yeah, you mentioned that you sit on the police board. When I was asking our community and asking around for questions, a lot of people wanted me to ask you about what it was like to sit on the police board. A lot of people said that they felt that there was a beef between yourself and the, I guess, is this the old boys club when we're talking about it, or is this a
I
different
mean,
boys
there
club?
was
um
no, I mean, that's interesting. No, I mean, the police board, so it's worth noting like the people around the police board table on the police board, myself, Counselor
yeah.
Baldwin, Bob Hall, who was appointed as a city resident. He was a counselor
Okay.
for a long time. Mary Tendeshat is currently the chair. She used to work for Cogeco, so she was a provincial appointee. So you have two provincial appointees, one
Right.
appointment from a city resident, and then two counselors that sit on that. That's the makeup of the board.
Okay,
And
great.
so there was the former chair, Les Karunas, was appointed by MPP Smith, and he's the one that kind of resigned a couple months back because he was campaigning for Dave and he shouldn't have been as the chair,
Right.
saying, I'm the chair of the police board, vote for Dave Smith, which you can't do that.
Scandal.
So that, there were some challenging times there, but like the acting chief Tim Farquharson and I have a great relationship. I have a great relationship with the Senior Officers Association. I've done ride-alongs with the police, and I know it's really easy for people to see like the American style of policing and think that that's what happens in Peterborough. But Peterborough is actually a leader back in 1978 in adapting what's called community-based policing.
Okay.
And so when I've gone on ride-alongs, the thing about that job that's changed so much too, 95% of those calls that I see that these guys and gals deal with every day are related to poverty, mental health, and addictions. So, and it's the same thing because we don't have adequate supports for people. The job of a police officer, it used back in the 50s, it'd be like chasing the bank robber down the street kind of thing. Um, and
Yeah.
these days, it's acting as like a social worker or a crisis intervention worker. And I've seen these guys and girls and women in action, and they go through now they do all this training around crisis intervention and de-escalation and all of those things because because they're dealing with people that are in crisis. So it's that the nature of
Okay.
that job has changed a lot too, and it's not necessarily. I mean, they still deal with like the break-ins, the thefts, the homicides, but the vast majority of their work is basically social worker stuff. And I think we should be paying again social workers if they made as much as police officers. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, someone here in chat is saying, do you think it's possible the police are acting differently when you're around and you're on the ride along?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I um I know some people have had, negative experiences with officers. If you have, certainly reach out and talk to me about it, because there are ways to deal with it through the Office of the Independent Police Review Director. There's all these acronyms and all this provincial stuff. Um,
Okay.
but I mean, yeah, and again, I just think it's easy to look at the kind of stuff that happens in the States, or even with the
Yeah.
RCMP, who were created to displace Indigenous people off their lands. But the Peterborough Police Service does really, and Tim Farquharson at the top tries to set the tone, as far as I know, of I mean, they were the first police service in Canada the other last month to put up an overdose awareness flag and really talk about the opioid crisis, and
Okay.
recognize that, like, they don't want to criminalize. We went through this with Tent City back in 2019. They're like, you can't just arrest people for being homeless, right? You can't arrest people for panhandling. Um, and
Right.
so, I mean, yeah, if you've had negative experiences with them, please let me know. But I think the vast majority of them, and again, I have like these conflicting feelings, because I'm like, half the time I'm like ACAB, and then I also see the work that these guys do. And a lot of them just want to help, which I know people don't
Okay.
necessarily believe.
Right. Yeah. So you are someone who believes in
Which
ACAB,
I get.
like her,
Well, I
or
mean,
or
it's the what again, when I see the stuff in the States where they don't have any training and they're just like, these guys with guns that just want to assert power. But we
yeah.
have very different standards in Ontario. There's very strict standards and protocols, going to the Ontario Police College, and you have to do diversity and equity training now. And, we did a whole thing around, Anishinaabe and Indigenous, cultural awareness training. So
Okay.
it is evolving. Um,
Right. I mean, would you
yeah.
say that you believe in like defunding the police, or would you fall more on police reform? Or I mean, you did say like in a bit of a diplomatic way that you wish more funding was going into social services rather than
Yeah,
people
I think
who have
so.
guns.
Yeah. So the thing with the police budget is that basically 93% of that is salaries and
Yeah.
it's not just officers. There's a whole host of people in that building that are answering the phones when you call 911. There's a whole comms team that are working 12-hour shifts, answering phone calls, helping de-escalate on the phone. Um, and those salaries are like that, they're unionized. Those are unionized salaries. So when people are like, just cut the
Right.
police budget by 50%, it's like you can't break a union contract without getting into like a huge problematic lawsuit. Like you can't do it. So, there's this 7% that goes towards other stuff, whether it's like the new cars or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I would say reform, absolutely. And we've seen a lot of that happen in the last couple of years. We have a lot of like victim services coordinators, like, people who are trained specifically to go in and deal with people that have gone through traumatic experiences. We have Pixie, the service dog. I don't know if you've seen it, if you don't follow her on Instagram. She's this beautiful black lab that is there. So if a kid comes in or anybody comes in that's gone through sort of trauma, Pixie's there and you can pet her, and it's, because
Okay.
dogs are calming. And
All
so
right.
there's a lot being done to sort of humanize it and make it less about, the cars and the guns.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
understand the concern. I get it for sure. But also, as somebody who's seen it very deeply on the inside, it's a lot more complicated, and actually a lot more. Um, there's a lot more to it than
Yeah.
the guys that you see on the streets, like
So
the
when you
cops
say
that you
so
see.
like when you say ACAB, we are making an exception for Pixie, the dog here. who's,
I always make exceptions for Pixie, and it's like, and
okay.
again,
Okay.
it's like, I feel that way when I see some of the stuff that happens down in the States. Like I've not I
Yeah,
don't feel that way about our Peterborough
for
police.
sure.
I
And I
will
mean,
say
I
that.
think the criticism is like the institution of policing. It's
The
not
institution
just
of policing,
the
absolutely. We need to,
So
so we talk about reform, we talk about,
yeah.
restorative justice, we talk about actual rehabilitation. And again, it's getting people, if we're properly investing and getting the province to invest in mental health supports, in stable housing, in
Yeah.
those things, in trauma, counseling, in education, give kids things to do, they're less likely to end up, you know, committing petty crimes, right?
Right.
There's
Right.
mountains of evidence for that. So the
Okay.
conservative government ain't going to do that,
Yeah.
but they should.
Yeah. Okay, sure. That's great. We do need to move on to the next
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, maybe we can if I mean we took a little more. That was not really a speed round
No,
question.
I'm
So I
sorry. I
think
talk a lot.
no, it's okay. I think speed round is over. It's okay.
Okay.
So when I first contacted you to do this interview, it was because you had said something on Twitter to the likes of Chex News, aka our local global news, um, chose to omit part of your story that concerned sexual harassment. Um, so first of all, like, yeah, so sorry that that's something that happened to you. And would you be willing to share the details of what happened with us today?
Yeah, I mean, all women have dealt with sexual harassment, I think, at some point or another. Whether it's comments about how we look or what we're wearing or, getting catcalled on the street, all of that constitutes sexual harassment, right?
Yeah.
Um, and they were, asking about that. And I said one specific story about a former mayor, uh, their married son who we were at this gala for the Humane Society several years back, and it was at the Peterborough Golf and Country Club. So there's like a lower parking lot and then an upper parking lot. And I was walking up the hill and this big
Okay.
SUV comes up beside me. And this
There's already an
guy,
apt metaphor there happening with the upper and lower parking lot. But
yeah.
okay, yeah.
And then as I'm
Anyways,
walking up the hill and this big car pulls up beside me and this guy goes, "Oh, yeah, I'd recognize that ass anywhere." And I looked at him and I was like, "Yep, I know you. I know your children and your wife." And but again, like, I bartended for years. Like, I'm used to dealing with creepy men and knowing how to kind of handle it. Again, women know how to protect themselves in those situations so that things don't escalate, right? Because that's
yeah,
the thing we're always worried about, saying no and men getting violent. Hashtag not all men, but hashtag yes all women. Um, and anyway, so I said that, and then I tweeted about, oh, I hope they use my anecdote about this former mayor's son who said this thing to me, and then they didn't. They didn't use that, and then I called them out about it on Twitter,
right.
because I thought you're wanting to do a story about being a woman in politics, like sexual harassment is part of that, and that's just one example, like
Yeah,
some of the emails that I get and some of the things that I've had said to me. And again, like I've been dealing with my whole life, so I just kind of am like, yeah, whatever, like,
right.
but it's like,
Um,
but I'm gonna call it out.
yeah, for sure. And do you know why they chose to omit that part of the story?
I was told it was an editorial decision.
Okay,
So
and that's all you got.
that's all I got. I mean, I have other
Um,
theories about it and who it is and how much money they
okay.
have and how much influence they have and whatever, but
Right. There's no potential conflict of interest happening here, or we can only speculate because
we
we
can
don't want
only
to get caught up
speculate. Yeah.
in legal battles. Is that the
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
um I mean I saw you the other day at the Peterborough Library as a counter protester for the religious group or the church that was there to protest the drag story time
Yeah.
featuring Betty Baker. Um, this felt like another form of harassment. I don't perceive them as protesters so much as I see them as harassers. And
Yeah, they're
I
intimidators. Well,
think,
the first thing that was said to
yeah,
me by the guy that was holding the sign that said, "It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve," and I walked by him and he
right,
said, "Nice tights, you whore." And I just smiled and kind of twerked a little because, like, again, I'm not gonna. And then I tried to talk to him later, and he just held the sign in front of me, and I said, "Oh, I know you're kind. You're afraid of women. You don't like strong women." And so
yeah,
that again, and then I said to him, "Oh yeah, ain't no hate like Christian love." Um, and uh, and yeah, they were just there to intimidate. They were there, as like under the auspices of like, we care about the children. It's like, no, you don't, and we care about freedom. It's like then fuck off and let people have the freedom to go to the story time or not. Now, that
yeah,
was like the biggest story time Peterborough Library's ever had. There was like 140 people that went. So it was an overwhelming success. As we know, the amount of people that came out in support of Betty Baker and of the story time was far larger than the 10 angry white dudes that showed up all
Yeah.
solemn, you know? I mean, that's the thing. I had my little speaker and I was dancing around and I kept telling these guys, I'm like, you should dance. You're going to be, dancing is healing. You probably would be a lot happier in life if you would just bust a move, you know? But they just glared at me and
Yeah.
said some
So
other
I
and
mean,
said some
like,
other untoward things to me, but I just thought, uh,
right.
but
Yeah.
they're
And
just
I mean,
trolls.
like,
Those are just
why?
the human trolls, you know?
Yeah, that's right. And when I saw you there, you said, I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And you were like, I'm here to troll the trolls.
Yeah.
And I said, in a way, you have kind of like become like the queen of the trolls.
Yeah.
Um,
Of trolling the
so
trolls. Hopefully not queen of the trolls, but queen of the
right,
anti-troll
yes.
movement. Let's do that.
Yeah. But in a strange way, I think they are like kind of fascinated with you in
I'm
perhaps an
living rent
unhealthy
free in
way,
their
you know?
heads for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So you also are famous for all of your cursing. Which, you know, maybe I can bookmark this section of the interview that there will be cursing now. But so
Children, stop watching.
yeah, children stop watching. And so your famous phrase, fuck off quads.
Yeah, you
Um
quads. Yeah.
fuck off you quads. Okay. All right. Make sure we get the exact quote here. And why do you think people are so outraged when you're really just like, you know, that's how normal people talk. Um
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that I think, you know, there was some people that were outraged, but again, like I had like over 1,000 calls and texts and messages
yeah.
from people from all over every province in Canada, like Detroit, Florida, Massachusetts, being like, oh my God, you rock. Thanks for saying what everybody's thinking. We need more politicians with balls. And I'm like, no, we need more politicians with ovaries. Thank you very much. And
Nice.
I think, I mean, again, I don't curse around the council table. I don't curse when I'm visiting with the elementary school kids or doing a ribbon cutting. Like there's a time and a place for
Yeah.
it. And Twitter, the cesspool that is Twitter, that is the time and the place. And again, it was in response to those fascists that came to our community with the intent to cause harm and disruption, to arrest our police and turn them over to the US military or something wild like that. And what pisses me off about that is that we had to call in all of our like all the police from all over the city who then can't go deal with a domestic violence call and help somebody out. They can't go help deal with an overdose and save someone's life because they have to
Yeah.
come to the station to deal with these entitled pricks who are trying to fucking bum rush the police station. Like the audacity to come into our community and cause that kind of harm. Like we don't know what kind of shit went down that day around the city because police weren't able to respond to the calls of the residents of the community. And so, again, you know, that's a specific group of people. And then people were asking me for comments. And, you know, I said, well, you know, though you can't engage in a rational debate with those people. They're like
Yeah.
justifiably like out to lunch. Like they think they're going to arrest the police and turn them over to the US military. And the queen that they follow is like a shape-shifting alien. Like that's just, it's lunacy. And so you got to meet them on their level and treat them with the respect that they treat you. And the disrespect that they showed our community by fucking around like that and by pulling emergency services away from the people in this community that pay for them and need them, I treat them by saying fuck off, you fuckwads, is much more respectful than what they did to our community that day. And I will stand by
Yeah.
that. And I think, again,
Okay.
so the few people that were outraged, again, there's a lot of people don't like women swearing. People like to police what women say and do and wear and blah, 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 blah. There's also very much a classist element in it. Some of the most vile things I've heard said in politics at the council table or whatever, misogynistic, homophobic, racist stuff said under a veil of decorum, and they're not swearing, they're using polite language, but saying homophobic, transphobic, racist, misogynistic stuff. But because they're saying it politely, nobody calls them out on it, nobody gets outraged. But I tell some fascists to fuck off, some people get outraged. Again, the vast majority of people were like, thank fuck for you saying that. We wish our mayor would say that. People were like, come run for mayor in Sudbury, come run for mayor in Ottawa. I was like, I ain't even doing it in Peterborough. I'm not doing it anywhere else. But again, there's
Yeah.
that element too of like that classist politic thing. And it's like, again, I don't come from a wealthy family. I didn't go to like a boarding or a finishing school, you know, I didn't go to Upper Canada College. Like I have
Yeah.
always had I used to get in trouble in school all the time for swearing. You know, my mom talks about, my mom's a big swearer too. That's where I learned the F word. And her story is that like I was maybe 2.5 or 3, and she was pushing me through the grocery store, and I started going, fuck. And she had to like take me down an aisle, the cat food aisle, because then I would go cat, dog, you know, and she had to do that to distract me from dropping the F bomb. So I mean, I've been
Okay.
doing it since I was 3. And again, there's a time and a place, right?
Right.
Like, and that's how normal people talk. You know, normal people, I mean, not everybody loves profanities. I get that. I am a fan of profanities. Um, but again, I don't do it around the council table. I don't do it at official events. I don't do it, I did it on my personal Twitter account in response to these fascists.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's really, nothing wrong with that. And I think it's actually a very Canadian kind of thing in
I know, I'm like,
politics. Like,
Canadians love to
yeah,
swear. Like, are you
exactly.
kidding me? I
Yeah.
like, well, you walk down the street and you hear it all the time. You know, people again just get outraged because they want to tell me what to say and what to do, and then they get mad when I don't listen to them. Or
Yeah,
I
for
do,
sure.
I do it, you know, I do it anyway. But
For sure. Okay. Well, I mean, I know we're already after 12, but I just want to talk a little bit about the municipal elections. Um,
sure.
you said that we should go out there and support the progressive candidates. And yeah, I think our community would really love to do that. Is there anybody you would like to shout out to? Or are you keeping
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
yeah.
no, I mean,
Um,
I am. I mean, Carlota James is running in the North End. She's an amazing, she's the one that organizes the Monarch Ultra. Like she's run all the way to Mexico to raise awareness about the migration patterns and the decline of the monarch butterfly.
okay,
Um,
awesome.
does a lot of work around pollinator gardens, bikes and walks everywhere. Like she's awesome. She's running in North Crest.
Okay.
Um, Alex Bierk and Joy LaChica running in Town Ward are both great candidates that I know personally. I again, because I'm a believer in term limits, and I think councillors should have a 2-term limit and then run for mayor 2-term limit. So I'm sort
Okay.
of like, even though I there's some councillors that I'm friends with who have been there for longer than 2 terms, and they don't maybe like it when I talk about it, but I just think it's new blood is good and new
Yeah.
ideas are good. Shantae White and Eleanor Underwood are running in the South End. They're both strong, great candidates. Shantae ran for the Green Party back in the 2021 federal election.
Right. Okay.
I have some signs on my lawn. I live in the West End. So I'm got a sign for Lyle Sanders and Matt Crowley, who are running out here.
Okay.
Um, and then, mayor wise, I've been supporting Councillor Wright. He's been an unequivocal supporter of mine. He's the only man around that table that's not once lied to me, who has told me to my face, like, if he can't support something, and then if it's something that I know he can't support, like I wouldn't ask him to support a 10% tax increase because I know ideologically he can't do that. But if it's been like, Stephen, I really need your support on this vote or this vote, he's like, all right, rock star, you got it. He calls me rock star all the time.
All
And
right.
and he's a hustler too. Like he's been hustling. He's got a lot of energy. He's got a lot of ideas. And and again, if he can't support something, he'll tell me. Other members of council will be like, "Oh yeah, I'll support you," and then 5 minutes later, in the council table, they stab me in the back. So he's
Okay.
never done that. He's always been open and honest and transparent with me, which again is something that is kind of a rarity in politics.
All right. Okay. That's great. That's great for us to know because it can really be really hard. There's so much information, so many candidates. It's really hard to kind of like keep track of it. So this is kind of like a nice Coles Notes version.
Yeah, and if people want to chat more, like my work cell phone number is, available online, and feel free to give me a call or a text or shoot me an email if you want more information. Because I also,
Okay.
you'll see over the next month, I'm also going to be putting out some receipts on some of these counselors that I don't want to see get reelected, who have
Oh,
done some
nice.
pretty shady stuff. So I'm
Okay.
not going to call them out publicly here, but it's going to get
Well,
interesting on social media.
all right. We'll definitely be watching and covering it on stream. So, appreciate that. So I do want to interview more folks and probably some of the folks that you mentioned. Um, oh, there's someone in chat saying, "Give us that dirt."
Oh, I will.
um,
I will. I just have to do it strategically.
yeah, yeah, that is wise. That is wise. Yeah, the receipts are important, right? Because then they're not gonna come for you in the court
No,
or whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
So, and one question I have for you is like, what questions do you think I should be asking them if they were to come on the show? What questions should I ask, and like, what kind of characteristics, in addition to honesty and transparency, do you think make for a good counselor or mayor?
So, sorry, you're trying to interview some of the people that are running?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope to interview more of the candidates and
Okay.
like, you have a
So,
unique insight. So like, what questions should I ask?
yeah, so if you're interviewing people that have been on council for a couple of terms, I would ask them like, what have you done that you're most proud of? Like, what have you actually accomplished? Because there's some folks that have been there for quite a while that it's like, what are your top 5 accomplishments? And it's like crickets. Um, I
Hmm.
think for the new candidates that are starting out, or that they're running for the first time, just trying to get to know a little bit more about them and their motivations for running. If somebody can't answer why do you want to be a city councilor, then it's like, okay, is it for the money? Is it for, because there's a certain gentleman running in the north end and a certain gentleman running in the south end that are well-known agents of real estate and developments and developers in this town.
Sorry,
And
sorry, you just cut out for a moment there. Could you just say that last sentence again?
okay, that there's two guys running, and I'm not, maybe I won't name the ward, you guys can figure it out, who
Sure.
are well-known sort of agents of big developers in this town.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so there will be numerous conflicts of interest should they be elected. Um, and that goes back to these shady backroom deals that we don't want to see. Um,
Okay.
so again, if you ask people like why is it that you want to run, what do you think you can bring to the table, um, I think those are good things too. People, you get a lot of a sense of people's personality and integrity when they talk about why. They want to improve the community, they want to make it more sustainable, they want to do this. Or it's like, if it's a really fake answer, it's kind of like, okay, do you just want the attention? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Um. All right. Penultimate question here.
Okay.
We are reaching the end, and again, thank you so much for your time. This is like super valuable, I think, for our community to know how you're feeling about all these things too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is next for you? And are we gonna see you maybe reemerge? We know that you've I've seen you shaking hands and stuff with like NDP folks. Is there a chance that you'll enter like partisan politics, or will we see you again in some
Yeah,
form?
that's the thing. Like, maybe the thing is like, yes, people know I'm NDP. They tried to get me to run in the provincial election this past year, and I was just like, no, I can't do it. I mean, I watch, what goes on at Queen's Park and at Parliament Hill, and I just think to myself, oh
Yeah.
my God, I would freaking hate that. If I had to sit in that thing and listen to Doug or Poilievre like just spewing their shit, like I could not.
But
I
we'd
would
get to
not.
listen to you too.
I know, but I'd have to listen to them, and I would
Fair.
just lose it. Like I just want to do something where I have a little bit more like autonomy and authority over my own life and schedule. So I mean, never
Yeah.
say never. I'm only 36, which is still really young for politics. It might sound really old to some of the people watching, um, but I do need some time just like out of the public eye to just focus on myself. Like my mom is
Fair.
taking my sister and I to Cuba in November for a week as like a celebration that I survived this nightmare.
Okay. Okay.
So
That's
I'm looking
great. I
forward
mean,
looking forward to that.
yeah.
I love Peterborough, but I
And
also need a little bit of a break to go somewhere where I don't know anybody.
that's right. Nice. Like shout out to the comrades in Cuba then
Shout
who've
out.
just I think legalized uh acknowledging queer families and
Oh,
the
right
way
on.
nuclear families are kind of like being reperceived. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, okay. Well, I mean that's great, and of course, like a theme that we
I mean,
talked
I
about
never say
earlier is
never,
just
right? Like,
yeah,
it's just been such a stressful 4 years that I like need to
fair,
step back. And again, I never intended to be a politician. Like I just sort of fell into it back in 2014
right,
because I saw who was around the table and I thought I could do that and I would be better at it than some of these guys. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, so I've got some transferable skills. So I'm gonna, do something else for a while and then we'll see.
okay, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you didn't even really sign up to be a politician, let alone one during a pandemic. Let alone one during a pandemic that created all of these weird conspiracy theorists and far right
Yeah,
violent and harassers and all of that. So, kudos to you. You've done,
thank you.
I mean, a fantastic job as a fellow South Common Mall school skipper weed smoker. It's humble beginnings out
Yeah,
here.
man.
So,
Look
yeah,
at us now.
congratulations. So, last question. The question I ask everybody is what is your favorite animated movie?
Oh, The Emperor's New Groove, probably.
Sorry, which one?
The Emperor's New Groove.
The Emperor's New Groove.
Do
Okay.
you know what that? Do you know that one?
I've personally never seen it, but I remember it's a Disney flick, right?
It's a Disney flick, and it's
Um,
like John Goodman and David Spade do the voices, and it's like this emperor, and he gets turned into a llama. Oh my God, it's so funny.
okay,
It's so
okay.
funny.
Well, we'll
Yeah,
have to check it out on your recommendation
check
along
it
with
out. It's
some
and
of
it's like
these.
this is the thing about Disney movies too, is that they're only like an hour and 20 minutes or whatever. So they're like
Yeah.
it's not like a commitment like watching Scarface or something.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Someone in chat is saying no wrong answers, but that's the right answer. So you got some people who agree with you in chat.
I
All
also
right.
haven't seen an animated movie in like years, like all these new ones that are coming out. I need to check them out because
Yeah.
Disney's finally doing like some progressive stuff maybe, but
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one that immediately comes to mind.
Okay, cool. It's a good answer. I'll have to check it out. Anyways, thank you so much. Diane, it was really great to have you on. If you're ever interested in coming back on the show,
Yeah, for sure.
we would love to have you and maybe even after the election or
Yeah, for sure. I'd be
whenever
happy to.
because yeah, you like I said, you're like a wealth of knowledge and we're not gonna censor you here. We're not gonna
Yeah.
omit. Well, I mean, how could we? You
Yeah.
get to
Well, and then
speak.
after the
So
election, like I'll really have stuff to say, right? Once I'm
yeah.
out of office. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, have a
Awesome.
great
Thanks,
rest of the
everybody.
day. And yeah,
Yeah, thanks, Danny.
thank you so much.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.